Okay. Right then, so tonight's session has got an aim of trying to give you the information that you need as SEND specialists within your institutions to make sure that the young people that you're responsible for are getting the best possible careers education. So we've got a couple of careers leaders in the room, but primarily you are working with SEND young people. And we want to make sure that you know what they should be getting and how you can support that process and challenge to make sure that they receive it. So the things we're going to be looking at is just why careers education is important. We're going to look at what we mean by careers education, what is kind of involved in that. We're going to look at how careers and preparing for adulthood overlap and feed into each other. We're going to have a little focus on experiences of the workplace because that's a really big and increasingly significant component of careers education. And then we'll look at what your role might be within all of this and think about what your next step might be following on from this session. So we'll start with the importance of careers education. So in terms of the importance of careers education, you may be coming to this from different angles. And I think it's worth saying at this stage that when we're talking about young people with SEND, all of our specialist provisions provide careers education, and some of them call it careers, some of them refer to futures, next steps, because sometimes families can be put off if they know that they've got a young person who probably isn't going to go into paid work. They can think that careers education is not for them. So when we're talking about careers, we're talking about the whole kind of futures and next steps agenda, regardless of what that next step might be for that young person. So one of the reasons it's important is in reducing the risk of young people becoming NEET. We've got growing numbers nationally. I think there's over 1 million young people nationally not in education, employment or training. In Gloucestershire, nationally our numbers are relatively low, but compared to what they used to be, they have increased rapidly. So it's kind of imperative upon all of us to try and make sure that our young people have a next step secured, but also one that really works for them so that they stay in it and don't end up dropping out of it. We want to increase learner aspiration and make sure that young people have the opportunities to find out about different sectors, different workplaces, different careers, so that they know what exists so that they can aim for it and know that there are lots of different things open to them. And careers education has a really positive impact on learner motivation, attainment and progress. So although often educational institutions have a real focus on academic attainment, what we see is if time is taken out of the curriculum to focus on careers, that then feeds back into young people being more motivated to do their other aspects of school as well. So what we've got here, and if this works, I'll be very pleased with myself, is a short video that's been made by the Careers and Enterprise Company that was actually made to focus on asking employers to engage in work experience offers, but really it kind of sums up really nicely why an opportunity for careers education is important. And I want to show it to you as well, because then it can really help contextualize the work we do, but also might be a useful thing for you to have to share with others if you are needing to do that kind of advocacy work with them. So I'm going to see if this plays. If the sound is working, can you just put your thumbs up on the kind of reaction button so I can see if that's working? Excellent. Okay, we'll carry on from there then. So as I said, that was designed for employers to kind of recruit employers to offer work placements, but I think that appeal applies to schools as well, as making sure that space is made within the school timetable and school structures to enable these things to happen. So when we're looking at careers education, and it's useful if you're not kind of immersed in careers education all the time to think about what exactly do we mean by that, so that you are able to then think about what it means for the young people for whom you are particularly responsible within your institution. So you may or may not be familiar with the Gatsby benchmarks, but the Gatsby Foundation is a charitable kind of science and education foundation, and it was commissioned by the government to do research into what makes really good quality careers education. And once they'd done their research, they produced a report with 8 benchmarks. And they said if schools are meeting all of these 8 benchmarks, then they will be offering good careers education. So this is what schools measure their careers education on, and colleges. And our careers leaders do 3 self-assessments in an academic year to see their progress in the school's programme set against these benchmarks and whether they're meeting these benchmarks. So I'll give you a moment to have a look at what those 8 benchmarks are. And if you could just, in reactions, if you could just give me thumbs up or some reaction if you were already familiar with the Gatsby benchmarks. Okay, so a few people. Okay, so in schools, most teachers, when they're in a classroom teacher in the subject, the benchmark that seems most relevant to them is benchmark 4, and that's linking curriculum learning to careers. But as SENDCOs and as people working with SEND, you've got scope to be involved in quite a lot of this, particularly around benchmark 3, which is addressing the needs of each pupil, and also thinking about encounters with further and higher education in terms of what the next step for those young people will be, and that post-16 transition. You might also support around benchmark 8, which is independent careers advice and guidance, and also kind of experiences of the workplace, supporting those young people to get out and go to different workplaces. So because all of these benchmarks will affect every young person in an institution, and since you've got young people that you're responsible for, then your work feeds into a lot of these and vice versa. So the Gatsby benchmarks were updated. There was a 10-year review, and the benchmarks were updated after review. Now, the core 8 benchmarks stayed the same. So schools are still working to those 8 benchmarks. However, there were changes to some of the definitions of those benchmarks and the descriptions of how to meet them. And the updates fall mainly into these 5 themes. There's a real focus on making sure that careers is at the heart of education and leadership. The careers leaders in the room will be able to testify to the fact that it can be quite a lonely role. When a careers leader is doing a great job, often other people in the school are really pleased that they're doing a great job and just let them get on with it. And there's nobody else in the school doing that job to kind of, bounce ideas off. And it also means that, say, if a careers leader who's got a fantastic program set up, they leave, go to another institution, and the school they've left can kind of go back to square one. So we really want careers to be embedded throughout the school or the college. Now, this is one that's really relevant to us, is there's a much greater emphasis on inclusion and impact for each and every young person, in particular, what are being referred to in the documents as kind of vulnerable learners. So that is economically disadvantaged young people, SEND learners, children in care, young carers, the groups that we know are more vulnerable. And there's a real emphasis on making sure that their needs are met and met first. There's a much, much greater emphasis on more meaningful and more varied encounters and experiences with workplaces and employers, and we'll look at that a little bit later on. There's more focus on the use of information and data, what data is gathered and how it's used. And again, I think this is particularly relevant to your roles. There's more emphasis on engagement of parents and carers. And I think you are really well placed to support with this, because within the SEND setting, you tend to have more contact, through annual reviews and other processes with parents and carers, and careers and transition conversations are part of that contact. So the benchmarks were updated, and therefore the statutory guidance that sets out, from the DfE, that sets out what schools should be doing in terms of career is also updated. So in the slides I sent out, there's a link there to the statutory guidance. If you want to check exactly what a school or a college should be doing in terms of careers, I would look at the guidance, because that has the benchmarks and some of the material all packaged together to say this is what you need to do. But what's really noticeable is in the updated statutory guidance, the real change is a repeated stress upon inclusion, personalisation, and additional support for SEND learners. So your young people have really been brought much more to the fore in careers guidance. Right, before we go on, has anybody got any questions about the benchmarks and statutory guidance? Okay, I will move on then. So we also have the Preparing for Adulthood kind of agenda and team, and I wanted to give a little bit of time in this session over to our PFA team to talk about the work that they're doing and how it fits in with careers. So I'm going to hand over here to Sarah. I'll carry on sharing my screen, but I'm going to hand over to Sarah and Tim to talk about the work that they do and how it ties into careers. Sarah, over to you.
Excellent. Brilliant. Well, hi, everybody. I know Tim and I have worked alongside some of you continuously at the moment, and it's great to meet people that we haven't yet met yet. So thank you, Vanessa, for putting the 4 pathways on. Just to give a little bit of context, we've been keen to work with Vanessa and the Careers Hub, and we've got a very strong relationship with the Employment and Skills Hub as well. And we're really keen to start building that bridge between careers and SEND, as there is a lot of overlapping, and SENDCOs can have the opportunity to get to know their young person maybe a little bit more in depth than careers leads, due to MyPANS and EHCP conversations. So sorry to bore those who know already, but just to give a little bit of context of what Preparation for Adulthood is and how it arrived in the 2015 SEND Code of Practice. And the education reforms of 2014, and then goes into the SEND Code of Practice 2015. Preparation for Adulthood was funded originally by the Department of Education, and working with the National Development Team for Inclusion to unpick barriers of why young people were not excelling in employment and education, and this is SEND young people. So lots of research and work was conducted with SEND families and young people, and not surprisingly, employment and education wasn't all that they were concerned about. And if you think about it logically, how can we expect our young people to excel in employment and education if we don't address their independence, their ability to catch public transport, the community health, community friendships and relationships, so young people accessing their community, and then of course the health. So together they defined the 4 Preparing for Adulthood pathways and what was important to them, and then that was put into the SEND Code of Practice. So Tim and I have worked on various preparation for adulthood initiatives. Tim, I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about the preparation for adulthood support team as well and some of the work that they do. But just to round it up, and we'll put some information in the chat as well, we've devised initiatives working with young people on our preparation for adulthood program. We regularly attend school events where we bring SEND partners in, our colleagues from SEND services, and talk directly to parents and carers at SEND coffee mornings. We've been hosting various preparation for adulthood events across the county to give that more information for parents, carers, and young people about where they can access support, all within those 4 preparation for adulthood pathways. And Tim and I have also developed and currently delivering some preparation for adulthood training, so we can come into your school setting. And this training, we're very passionate about it being delivered to TAs. So as we know, TAs have long-standing relationships with young people, and by empowering our TA workforce, we're helping empower them to identify preparation for adulthood practice. And then following on from that, we've created some resources called Future Me, which can help you evidence your young person's preparation for adulthood pathway, and that includes careers as well. And then that can help evidence their journey. So we do have some resources that are available on the local offer. So what I'll do is I'll put some information into the chat and some links and some hyperlinks, including the post-16 toolkit. Oh, thank you, April. And yeah, so with some information including the toolkit, and then our contact details will be there as well. So any more, if you'd like to have a conversation away from this training session today, then Tim and I would happily arrange a meeting, and then we can discuss preparation for adulthood and how we can support your school setting in more detail. Tim.
Yeah, brilliantly summarised there, Sarah. And so we've been, I suppose, there's probably several years worth of work between us whilst we've developed a kind of a PFA strategy. And so there's the, as I mentioned at the beginning, there's kind of the strategic vision, if you like, for PFA and what we feel that looks like in terms of not only supporting young people, but kind of educational professionals and also parent carers as well. So that is definitely part of our conversation. And I think worth noting that some of the direct work we do with young people is all around kind of working with them to help identify and realise their own aspirations, because obviously preparation for adulthood, we're really concerned with the young person's voice. So a lot of the tools and resources we've developed are all around helping young people to realise what's important to them and for them. And from there, we can kind of use that to spotlight what might be of interest when we're thinking about potential employment and things like that. So we've supported a number of young people in thinking about their kind of future career aspirations and how we may be able to explore that. So again, that kind of forms our overall picture really of preparation for adulthood and the various ways we've got to support communities. Sarah's just posting a lot of our kind of content there in the chat, and as Sarah mentioned, if anybody would like to, get a bit more detail about what that looks like, we'd be happy to speak to individuals outside of the meeting.
Thank you, Tim. Thank you, Sarah. Before we move on, has anyone got any questions for Tim and Sarah about PFA? Okay. I would just like to add that I work with all the specialist provisions in the county, and I met with the careers leaders last week. And the workbook, the Preparing for Adulthood workbook, which is the kind of the way to elicit student voice around these strands that Tim and Sarah and their team have developed, is hugely popular. It's been adapted in lots of different ways, but actually, and it might be interesting for the SDS people, we were talking about how important it will be for that booklet or folder or however it's presented to go with them to their post-16 destinations, so that that communication of that student voice goes straight away. So you're not depending on building new relationships to elicit all that information again. It's already part of that transition, and there was a real push within the group of careers leaders that I was with to do that. So it's proving really, really popular. Okay. So we will have a look now at experiences of the workplace, because if you speak to your careers leader at all, you will know that this is the really big development for them this year, and even more so next year. And that's as a result of changes in government ambition and policies. So I'm going to run through what that is with you, and then look at potential ways that we can support you to make sure that the young people that you are responsible for get the best possible experiences of the workplace along with the rest of their colleagues. So the government's vision for work experience was expressed in the manifesto that the Labour Party produced before the election and is now being brought into practice. And the aim is for 2 weeks worth of work experience for every young person between years 7 to 11. Okay. Now, that isn't going to be a 2-week solid block. It's 2 weeks worth over those 5 years of education. So you can divide it down into 2 weeks, 10 days, 50 hours. Sometimes people find 50 hours even more intimidating, but it gives you the idea that you can do it in small chunks that then add up, and it goes from year 7 through to year 11. So it looks quite alarming at first, but actually it may mean that in some ways it's easier to get work experience placements, because employers are often put off by that whole every school in the county sending their year 10s out for 1 week at the same time and having to accommodate them. They can offer lots of different activities and experiences of different depths over those 5 years across the school year. And the idea is that this will be pivotal in improving work readiness and employability, which feeds into our NEET prevention ambitions. You know, we've got such a lot of neat young people. Making sure that they are ready for their next step is really important. And the idea is that experiences should be aspirational, they should be inspirational, and employer-led. We want them to be first-hand and active in the sense that it's a two-way employer-pupil interaction. And your careers leaders have got lots of kind of guidance in the statutory guidance about what makes a meaningful experience of the workplace. But the key thing is that there is possibility for interaction, and also maybe a task that the employer sets. The way this tends to break down is that it will be in key stage 3, we're thinking about work experience activities. So young people are going out for short visits and doing some kind of work-based activity, or going out to visit an employer and then going back to school and doing a work-related task that then the employer can kind of give them feedback on. So there's lots of different models being developed at the moment. And then the more in-depth placements will be in key stage 4, probably in year 10, being realistic about its kind of school setups. So for those of you working in colleges, this doesn't affect you directly in the sense that this work experience guarantee or modern work experience is for 11 to 16-year-olds. But what you should see is young people coming through with more and more varied experiences of the workplace as they come through to you, and hopefully more knowledge and more employability. Now, this is a really big ambition, and it's not statutory yet. The expectation is that schools will be starting to deliver this from September 2026. In the guidance this year, it's asking schools to lay the groundwork, so to be doing as much as they can to start to build towards this, because obviously it's a huge request for schools and it's a huge request for employers. And what we're doing as a hub at the moment is working with schools to help them think about how to accommodate this, how to make it possible in their institutions, and how to come up with innovative approaches. We're also working at the other end with employers about how they can offer these activities in these placements, and again, in a kind of innovative, holistic way. So that's the ambition that your careers leader will be currently working towards and possibly being quite concerned about. One thing we're saying as a hub is, if you've got a really large school, if you've got 250 students in a year group, we would prioritise the most vulnerable students first. So rather than trying to make sure that every student in your institution is getting their 50 hours, which is the ultimate ambition, start with your SEND learners, start with your most vulnerable students, make sure that they are getting this, because other students may have other avenues that you are able to tap into and other networks that they can use to get those experiences. What we need to do is make sure that the students least likely to get that range of experiences in other ways is your priority. And that's really where you as SEND teams come into this, in supporting that, and also in kind of challenging your careers leader to make sure that that is the priority. And the hope of this CPD is that we give you the information you need at the starts of that, so that you know what should be happening for your SEND students as this programme becomes, you know, part of what we're expected to do. So one useful way of thinking about experiences of the workplace as a progressive programme is this model. So it's kind of that typical pyramid hierarchy. So there's more at the bottom. So kind of introduce and inspire is kind of year 7 and 8, key stage 3, when we just want to give young people as many different experiences and encounters as possible, to let them explore what their interests are, what their strengths and skills are, but also to just find out how many different sectors and jobs and roles there are without going into any depth, but just getting a huge array. And then as they progress through school, kind of year 8 and 9, they'll look at investigating and exploring and starting to narrow that down a little bit. Start to think about, well, we went on all these visits and I was really interested in this. And I thought I'd be interested in that, but it turns out I don't think it is for me. And they're just starting to dig a bit deeper into things that they might be interested in. And then at the top, we've got apply and demonstrate, which might be a more focused placement where they go off and spend a few days with an employer. And we're looking at different models for that. It might be that your year 10s are out of school for a week, but they might spend 2 days with one employer and 2 days at another in the same sector, and then a day at the university, finding out about other pathways into that industry, so that there's a much more kind of meaningful set of experiences. So the idea is, at the younger years, higher volume of activities, but lower depth. And then as they move through, fewer activities and experiences, but with much more depth and that chance to apply and their skills and demonstrate what they've learned. So this again is the models that your careers leaders will be kind of working out how, at the moment, how they're going to build this into their careers programme, how they're going to implement it. One way that we as a careers hub are supporting this is by commissioning a company called Duck2. So last year we paid this company Duck2, and what they do is they broker work experience placements, and they are really short placements. They are kind of up to 2-hour visits. So it's not like when we talk about work experience, we're not talking even about a whole day out. It's a 2-hour visit for small groups of up to 5 students. And if you want to take just one young person, a TA, you can do that as well. It doesn't have to be 5. You can take just a couple of students out. And they go off and they visit an employer and they do a hands-on activity. So we've had a huge range of employers involved in this. Some that I can think of, there was an advanced manufacturing business in Tewkesbury that took some students. The students from that school, it's one of our specialist provisions, have gone away and written a business plan about why their school should have a 3D printer, because they were so inspired by what they saw. We've had students go to Orion Holidays near Cirencester, and it was a specialist provision with students with a really wide range of needs, many of whom won't go into paid employment, some of whom will. And it's a holiday kind of village. So what they did is they gave them an introduction, gave them a tour, and then they took the young people around one of the holiday homes, showing them the tests that they would do after each kind of rental to check that everything was in working order, you know, making sure the light switch works, making sure the television works. And the young people did that task. So it was a genuine work experience and an encounter with different people. And there's huge benefits from it. It was really, really popular. We've just had such a range. What we're seeing is that these opportunities, they were offered out to all of our schools. The only schools that were able to take advantage of them were our specialist schools. And I think, and they're the schools that I work with, I think that they have more flexible curricula. Lots of them, their curriculum for the older students is the PFA strand. So it's easy for them to go, right, well, this is our employment strand of our curriculum. They have more school transport, you know, they have teachers who can, you know, school cars that they can drive students, and they have a higher staffing ratio. So there are things that are inherent in specialist school provision that mean it's easier to get small student groups out. But we did offer this to our mainstreams as well. And I guess my appeal to you is, as a former teacher, I know that there's often groups of students who aren't in lessons all the time, for whatever reason that may be. You know, there's often a room somewhere with a small number of young people with an adult working with them. This would be an ideal activity for those students, and it would really help to enhance their experience. It'd be something really meaningful, and it might be the thing that helps to re-engage those young people if they're not always engaged in education because they're struggling to find that connection with it. So I really wanted to make you aware of this because you know, we're happy that our specialist provisions are taking up these opportunities. I think the fact that they can just shows how well tailored it is to the needs of young people with special needs and other kind of vulnerabilities. You know, these employers know that they are going to be working with those students. The careers leaders from the SENDCOs have gone and done risk assessments first, but the risk assessments are all done by Duck2 as well. So you'll receive all that. You don't have to do any of that work. But I just wanted to let you know that this exists. And if you are interested, talk to your careers leader or talk to us directly, and we'll kind of facilitate that conversation, because I think it's a really fantastic opportunity that we'd like more of our young people who need that additional support, that aren't just the ones who've got EHCPs and are in a specialist provision. We'd like them to have access to this. And I think you might be the people who are able to support your careers leader with this, because there's overlap there, and you might potentially have the opportunity. So if you've got any questions about Duck2, just put your hand up, or you can get in touch with me and we'll have a separate conversation and take it from there. Right, have we got any questions about experiences of the workplace before I move on? Okay. Right, finally, your role in careers. Now, I think what's really important to say is that you already do a huge amount. You know, whenever you are doing that transitions work with the young people, you know, that come under your kind of umbrella, you are doing careers work all the time, because you are thinking about their next steps. You're doing the looking at the PFA strands. You're already doing lots of this, and I think that needs to be recognised. And what we want to do is make sure that that is combined with the work of your careers leader, that you make sure that you know what they're doing and that they know what you're doing, because it might be that you're doing fantastic careers work with your SEN students and they might not be aware that what you're doing overlaps with their role. So it's really to encourage you to kind of communicate with your careers leader. You may already be doing that. I mean, I know, April, you share an office with your careers, your SENCO, so that works. But make sure you're communicating with them, because there is huge overlap. I hope you can see from this session where your two roles overlap. Work with the PFA team. Sarah and Tim are amazing, and I would really recommend making the most of that offer. And they are so innovative, and relational and really quite brilliant at co-creation. So they will really help you to capture your young people's voices and really get them heard. And I can't stress, how good they are at that. And that's it. Capture your learner voice. We've got some tools that we can recommend alongside the PFA workbook to help you with that. There's various different resources available. But again, I think the PFA team are really well placed to support you with that. But really, and you do this is literally what you do, but advocate for your SEND students, really bang the drum, make sure that they are getting the first, chance at any opportunities that come along. And obviously that they aren't being prevented from accessing opportunities either because somebody thinks that they're not capable, or that it isn't relevant, or that, well, they'll never go into that industry anyway. You're the person who's saying, actually, that's not your decision to make. So, and I know this from our specialist provisions. We've got one of our specialist schools. Again, it's got pathways from paid employment through to young people who are going to adult social care with PMLD. They are going on one of the Duck 2 visits to an insurance company. And those young people are not going to go and work in an office being insurance brokers, but they're going to go and do this visit, and they're going to find out about household safety and how to make an insurance claim and what would be an insurance claim and what wouldn't. So in terms of the PFA strands, they're getting independent living, they're getting community inclusion. They might not be doing that job, but they're learning about jobs that other people do. So really, I guess I'm saying is make sure that you're really pushing for your young people to be involved, even if it might not be a destination that they're going to, but also encourage it in case it is something that sparks their interest and they could be involved in. And there are so many jobs involved in so many of the sectors that you'd be surprised by, that we just want to make sure that they get those opportunities. And then the other side of that is monitor it. Your school will have an approach, or will be working out its approach to how it's going to provide these 10 days worth of work experience. It won't necessarily be aiming for all students to have that immediately, but that's the ambition. So you can make sure, as part of your monitoring of your SEND students, that you are checking that they are building up their hours of placements. And if they're not, you're supporting that process to make sure they get the most out of this. I feel like I've got a little bit ranty about this, but I feel really strongly about making sure that they get those opportunities. So that's everything from me. I think now it's just to think about kind of what are the next steps and what support would you like or find valuable from us. So I'm going to kind of stop sharing my screen now so that I can see everyone. And just really to invite from you any thoughts on what your next steps might be, what you might do as a result of this session. What's your next step? What are you going to go away and do? Who are you going to talk to? Is there something you need to find out more about? So over to you. Sarah.
Just to add, we talked about all of the support that we can offer, the training, the resources, the PFA program is all free. So I just thought I would put that out there as well. It's always quite useful to know. So if you would like to have a conversation and carry on, then feel free to contact him and then we can be in touch and show you some of the workbooks that Vanessa's been talking about as well.
I should add actually that the Duck 2 visits were all free as well. They're all paid for. Hannah.
Hi, can I just ask, because obviously it sounds absolutely amazing, and I'm the SENDCO in our school. Is there any funding from anywhere to help sort of get extra hours for people to be able to facilitate some of this, in terms of, we're already really stretched, and I don't want to be that negative, whingy voice, but I've got to fight the corner for schools and where we're at. So I absolutely love all of this and think it's amazing, but my initial gut feeling is, who is going to be able to do this?
Yeah, it's huge. I know we've got a couple of careers leaders in the room who the thought of managing this for this number of people is actually quite overwhelming at times. We could talk separately, Hannah. And what I think we're looking for is how businesses and employers can support with this as well. You know, can they support putting on transport? How can they do their part to support with this as well? But what we could always do is have a separate conversation, look at if there's any particular examples and employers that want to work with you. One thing we have now that because we're part of the county council, any businesses that get a contract from the council have to have social value as part of their offer, and lots of them want to work, or they want to do careers, they want to work with young people, and that then comes to us and we can say, right, well, these are what our requests are, these are the needs of the schools, how can you support this school? And that is part of their contract with the council for the contract that they've been offered. So there are potential routes. It's not straightforward, there's not like a nice pot we can draw on, but there may be ways we can, you know, work on individual projects. It's not a great solution, but there are possibilities, but we'd need to work around things. Rob, have you got anything to add on that?
I don't think so. Like you've kind of summarised it, but like we said at the beginning, maybe start off small. And I think so. I did used to work with the school, so Kiwi quite closely, and now Angie looks after them. But like we said, maybe start off small because I know you've got minibuses, and just look at those. There are a couple of employers that are looking to do things, and just start it off, and then you've got an argument to go back to your head, who I believe is Hannah, and just go, look, this is what we're trying to do, and it's going to be a slow burn, unfortunately, and that's why we're here to try and help with that side of things. But just trial things. Some things will work, some things won't work. But if you don't ask, you don't get, and that kind of side. But yeah, we're here to support Angie more than me, but I will be around.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Debs.
Is there a criteria set for the DUC2 referral, or is it open to all SEN, or is it just EHCPs, or is there?
All SEND, and not even just SEND, it can be your FSM, it could be your children in care, it could be young carers.
Okay. And
I'm fairly confident that's the case.
And is that in terms of like, is it local businesses within a local area? Is it all over Gloucestershire?
It's all over Gloucestershire, but what we can do is kind of hook you up with DUC2, and then they will start to kind of send local opportunities your way. So I know there's a design company in Lydney, Rectory Designs, that a couple of our schools have been to visit already. Well, one has been to visit, and the hospital are going visiting them soon. So we, you know, obviously there's not that. Forrester's a little bit short on employers, but once we know that you're interested, then we can kind of send things your way.
And is it then our responsibility to get them there, did you say, or is the transport covered with that? It's our responsibility to get them there.
Transport's yours, yeah.
Thank you, Vanessa.
You're welcome. April.
Sorry, it took a while to turn the mic off. Again, I think mine, because we are a small secondary school, and being small does have its advantages when we do trips, etc. But I know booking the coaches at the moment is a real issue, because they are completely maxed out. The other day we struggled to get a coach to go to Cheltenham. We tried all the local providers and they were just completely fully booked. And we've had that on a few occasions now. So we're having to book things now, sometimes a year in advance. So for instance, the geography trips that we run, we're now having to book a year in advance just to secure the coaches because they are absolutely completely maxed out. And for us to get a coach just to Cheltenham the other day, we were getting quotes in excess of £600 just from Cinderford to Cheltenham, which is like 45 minutes to an hour. And I really don't know how small schools with no budget, deficit budget, are going to afford to do this. And because even if you take the minibus out, that's still, you still need 2 members of staff to accompany 15 students, because one of them will need to be first aid trained as well. And it's yeah, but that, but I as you know, I love all of this and I think it's great, especially prioritising SEND kids and your most vulnerable. But it is going to be a challenge even for the most passionate of careers leaders in schools, just the capacity as well. But I think my next steps are obviously going to be working with Rob and Ange, and just to make sure that I've got a plan in place just to how I'm going to fit this all in and who's going to do it, because it's not just the transport cost, it's the costs of you being out on school, because who's going to cover your lessons when you're a teacher as well. So it's all of those things to factor in as well.
And I think there's curriculum issues as well, you know. If we're gonna have to start small, but the disruption that potentially has to curriculum when you've got small groups of students missing lessons as a teacher, you know how kind of frustrating that can be and how difficult it can be to catch that up. So I think it's going to need leadership from like governors, SLT, head teachers. Is going to need a real drive. And we're working on that, you know, we're doing training for governors as well, but
Yeah,
it's going to take some real serious rethinking. And I think you've raised a really valid point, because there's lots of representation here from the Forest and from Stroud. I think if you're in the centre of Gloucester as a school, you've got more access to employers that you can access a little bit more easily when you are out in Cinderford and there's one bus into Gloucester.
yeah, and I don't know if people, I don't even know if people are aware now, but the bus that a lot of our students get to go to Gloucester College, actually in Gloucester, is 4 in the morning. So quite a lot of our students now are missing the buses and are getting penalised because the buses are 4 in the morning. Yeah, it's a real issue at the moment.
That's interesting. Thank you. Bob, were you gonna?
I was just going to add very quickly. I don't know who is from the Forest in this kind of call, but I know I've had very early discussions with Hartbury around the use of their minibuses, and they're very conscious that they have these minibuses that don't get used during the day, and whether there was scope for like a sharing agreement. So there's a bit of work I'm doing with the Forest of Dean Council, and similar. These big businesses, could we get them to donate into a pot, and then schools apply for money for transport through that? Very early discussions, but again, it's all part of that corporate social responsibility, especially with kind of like the thing like the 5 acres new leisure centre, big building contract. Okay, what are you doing for the local community other than building this massive sports centre? What else could you be doing? So very early discussions, so might be worth picking that up with the council. I know Hartby were keen to do that, so then it's a starting point.
Yeah, Debbie.
Sorry, I have no question. I was just having a stretch.
You've still got your hand
And I
up.
have
Really.
put my hand
That's
down
okay.
from last time, so I am sorry.
You put your hand up. Say, I'm in the Forest.
Technology,
Okay.
hey.
Well, look at that. It's 16:59. Thank you so much for your contributions. Thank you for attending. I sent the slides out in advance, but please, if you've got any questions, any follow-up, talk to your careers leader. Talk to me and Rob. We've got our colleague Ange as well. So some of your schools will come under, will be Rob's schools, some will be mine, some will be Ange's, and we'll work with you. But you know, keep this relationship going, so that we can work with your school as a team, as well as with your careers leader. And if you've got any questions at all, do get in touch. And thank you very much. It's almost 5 o'clock, so I'm going to let you all go. Bye bye.
Thank you.
Excellent.